I don't really know where to start. It is a lovely Wednesday, I'm not even sure. No, it is Thursday. And I'm sitting at my desk getting some work done, and I just thought I would start a little vlog or talk a little bit about something that's kind of been going on and bothering me a little bit, and it's kind of, I suppose, only become an issue since I've been editing these videos, which I do very minimally, as you may be able to tell. But I suppose because recently, in case you don't know and in case you haven't seen any of my videos before, my name is Jen, I'm autistic, I have ADHD, and I have two chronic illnesses: Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is kind of hypermobile joints, which causes a lot of pain, and I have adrenal insufficiency, or Addison's disease. So the second of that, which is Addison's disease, has been a kind of more recent diagnosis as of January, and part of the treatment for that, if not the whole treatment really, is starting steroids. So in short, there's a few different types of Addison's disease. There's primary, which is typically called Addison's, and secondary, which is called adrenal insufficiency. I have adrenal insufficiency. So essentially I have a problem with my pituitary gland in my brain that does not send the signal to my adrenals to release cortisol to help me deal with like stress or anxiety or positive stressors too, you know, good things as well. So yeah, basically part of the treatment for Addison's is taking a replacement steroid that kind of simulates or replaces the amount of cortisol you usually develop in a day. It's a pretty small dose of a steroid in comparison to, you know, if you were taking steroids for a different reason, in terms of, you know, maybe an inflammatory illness or pneumonia or something like that, as far as I understand anyway. My medical knowledge is pretty limited, but yeah, it's now April, so I have been on steroids for 4 months and it has completely changed my life. It's been so astoundingly positive, really, because before that, prior to being diagnosed, especially in the kind of acute stages of being unwell in the last few months before I was diagnosed, I was exceptionally unwell. I had to leave my job. I had no life. I couldn't lift my head off the pillow really, to do anything. I had no quality of life. I'd really wasted away. So having this diagnosis and treatment has changed the game. It has really. It's still a novelty, it's still amazing, it's still kind of astounding, because I think when you've been sick for a long time, and I've had adrenal insufficiency for quite a long time, I think, or my endocrinologist thinks, even though I became acutely unwell last year, you start putting parameters on what you're able to do. You start putting limits on what you can do. Because you're trying to protect yourself the whole time, you know, you're trying to protect who you are nearly, and to maintain a level of yourself at all times. So, you know, you kind of think, okay, my friends are going out for dinner, but they also want to go to the cinema. That's quite a long evening. I'm going to maybe just do the cinema and then go home afterwards and then take the next day to sleep, to rest. You know, everything is done in terms of like careful calculations of what's worth an expenditure of energy. I hope that makes sense. I'm not sure it does, but so it's still new to me to have a normal level of energy, to be able to wake up in the mornings and not feel as though my legs are kind of like jelly, or that there's no blood in my veins, or that instead of blood there's cement there, you know. It's hugely revolutionary feeling, because I've often, for the last 10 years, which is kind of, I first went to the doctor with adrenal insufficiency symptoms about 11 years ago, which was alarming. But secondary adrenal insufficiency tends to move much slower than primary, so that's not uncommon really. So I've learnt, but it's funny because my mind has always been an incredibly active, busy place. I've always been incredibly ambitious. I've always had goals, to-do lists. I'm going to do college to the highest standard, my master's to the highest standard, my PhD to the highest standard, my friendships, my relationships, everything to the highest standard, you know? And obviously my reasons for doing all of those things made a lot more sense when I realized I was autistic about 2 years ago. So that's kind of wild. But my body's never been able to match that level of energy. It's never been able to keep up. It's never felt on par with the energy of my mind until the last 4 months, which is incredibly strange, incredibly surreal and exciting. It's nice to be able to like think of things and have ideas and be able to follow through with them. I'm still in a stage where I think I'm kind of afraid that the ground will fall out from under me at any point and I'll end up backpedaling and relapsing, and suddenly the steroids won't work and I'll be sick again, which is probably pretty natural. But it's funny because part of the warnings about steroids, I guess, and I mean warnings in a very light way, because, you know, this wasn't exactly something my endocrinologist was really emphasizing, because it wasn't the most important thing, was how steroids can affect your appearance and impact your face, impact your weight, your retention of water, everything. And you know, this is something that, because in the past I've had experiences with disordered eating, with absolutely atrocious body image, and I say in the past, I mean in the very recent past, like this is tangible in my memory. I'd be lying if I didn't say that I was a little bit afraid about what steroids might do to my body, and that how my adjustment would go to that. So I kind of felt very nervous about it, and it wasn't something I was going to let stop my treatment, because in reality feeling healthy, you know, was so much more important, and I know that logically, but it doesn't mean that emotionally the feelings of fear weren't there, you know. So it's kind of something I've been really aware of, and I think it's kind of similar in the sense that as when I was, you know, my eating was most disordered and I was weighing myself constant, you know, those things years ago, I used to imagine ever having a child and getting pregnant, and would think, how am I meant to cope with how fast one's body changes during that kind of thing? This was really, really similar in that instance. So it's kind of similar fear. And it's funny because when I look back on vlogs that I've done from February, when I was on a higher dose of steroids, my face was definitely swollen. My face is quite swollen, I think. I have a level of puffiness that comes with steroids that can happen if you've had to updose, and updose just means increasing your dose for a particular reason, whether it's you know, you get the flu for a few days, so you have to double your dose, or you go through something traumatic and have to take take some extra medication to cope, because if you didn't have adrenal insufficiency, your body would produce extra cortisol to help you cope with that stress. So that can in turn increase your appetite. It can increase the amount of water you're retaining. It can mess with your electrolyte balance slightly as well. So the amount of water and salt you retain changes, which means your face can get very puffy at different points, like your neck. Like the thing I'm really conscious of in these videos is my neck, because I have a level of like puffiness under my neck that feels like a double chin, and which is there, it is absolutely present, like, and in reality it's not a big deal, but because I've always had a round face, I'm super aware of it. So when I was editing the last few vlogs, I found it so hard to look at myself. I felt really like acutely disgusted at myself, which sounds so daft, considering this is my first experience of feeling alive in a long time, if not forever. So, but I'm going to try and be as honest as possible about documenting my feelings to do with this process and these steroids and everything. You know, for a few weeks there, I tried to reduce my steroids, and as much as I was saying that was because I wanted to be on the minimum dose for my health, it was definitely also a case of trying to maintain my appetite to a degree that I could keep up with, and all of these kind of silly little things. And I felt so much physically worse, you know, so physically worse. And it's the difference between an extra 2.5 milligrams a day, you know, in terms of a tiny dose. So it's something that's kind of hard for me to figure, but part of all of this was I made an agreement to myself that I wouldn't weigh myself. From when I was last at the endocrinologist, she weighed me and things, and which is an experience I hate anyway, but I can see why it's necessary. But I knew, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna start the steroids and focus on how I'm feeling and try to avoid weighing myself. So in the last 4 months, I've done things like, I suppose the dysmorphia within my own body and mind about how much I weigh has been so dramatic. Like I've assumed, okay, well, I'm retaining so much water that I'm at least 2 sizes bigger now. There must be at least 15 pounds in the difference between 1 week to the next. Look at my face. My face is so puffy, which means the rest of me must be puffy. All of these kind of things. And I went to the doctor yesterday and I was weighed, and my weight was the exact same as it was 4 months ago. The exact bloody same. And it just, for some reason, it kind of brought home like how I've been feeling and the ridiculousness of it, but also the validity of those feelings. And I don't have any answers. I don't have any, you know, nice end tie up for this little video, but it's something I wanted to document and talk about because I think this medication's lifelong. You know, my adrenals aren't functioning at all. So, as far as we're aware anyway, so I will be on steroids for life. This is a condition I have to manage. It's difficult, it's hard, it's challenging, and so is the perception of my body within this experience. And I think that now being 4 months diagnosed, I would like to be able to look back at this, you know, when I'm 4 years diagnosed, or, you know, 40 years diagnosed, and see if my anxieties have changed, or if there's something I can look back on with a level of grace for myself. So I just thought I'd hop on and have a little bit of a chat about that, because more for myself to log this feeling of absurdity within myself, or worrying about my chin. Like, genuinely, I've had to avoid looking at the camera a lot in this because I know I will just keep looking at my chin. And I don't think I'll always be like that. I think it's something I'm constantly working on. You know, I'm in therapy now, which is great. But it's something I wanted to document. So I don't know if anyone else has similar experiences with adrenal insufficiency, or, you know, medication that can alter your weight or appearance in any way. Things like that, because, you know, there's lots of other conditions that have medications that do that. So it's not just an adrenal insufficiency thing. But I'm always interested in hearing about it, and it's been a while since I just had a chat. This is very off the cuff, obviously, hence why my sheets are in the wash, my bed's a mess, there's nothing happening really, you know, I'm just wearing an old t-shirt, but it felt like a good time to talk about it. So I'm gonna stop here, but thank you if you watched this far, if you similarly struggled, you know, even like things like being on the pill alters your weight and stuff like that, and your retention of fluids, but also your mood, which can impact how you observe your own body in space. So, you know, it's not just an adrenal insufficiency thing, but it's just something I wanted to talk about, because moral of the story is I feel so much better, but I'm cognizant of these issues. That's literally it. That's not really a great moral of a story, but so yeah, I will talk to you guys in my next video, whenever or whatever that'll be, who knows. Yeah, bye.